Hey everybody, welcome to the Deeper Learning Details series with the What School Could Be University of Kentucky Academy program and what we're trying to do this year. I'm Susanna Johnson and thanks so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over right now to Jason and Justin.
All right, folks. Well, I was out there visiting you all, so I'm Jason. So good to see you again, Kim. So today we have Kim Garcia, who is the principal of Advanced Learning Academy. We have Deborah Park, who is, you were an English teacher at Circulos, and now you're the coordinator?
I was the curator of projects and partnerships at Circulos. I was an English teacher before that, but at another school, and now I'm the coordinator of the Circulos program.
Okay, awesome. And we also have Brian Davis, who's a coordinator of talent, which we're going to be excited to hear about that role.
Yes, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, of course, this is you all haven't met Justin yet face to face, but this is Justin Bathen, my partner in crime. We usually travel everywhere together, but we didn't actually travel out to Santa Ana together. I was on my own. So awesome. So since this is an academic research project-ish, we do need to ask for consent. Do you all consent to having this recorded, and we can use the transcript into our next book product?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Justin?
Yeah, so the reason we wanted to touch base in this Deeper Learning Details interview series is to dive a little bit more deeply into some specific practices that we got to see as we were out traveling around and interviewing all these schools. I mean, that initial moment, you're overwhelmed with so many cool things. But then as we sat and we looked at the data and we really tried to unpack which schools were really exceptional at which things, we wanted to circle back around and do some follow-up interviews to really understand more of what was making that so special. And so tonight we want to unpack as much as possible sort of the authenticity, relevance, cultural relevance that sort of gets baked into all the different things you have going on. There's a lot of different things we'll sort of cover and unpack them, but we felt a thread running through all of those things of much more sort of authenticity at the kid level. And so sort of understand how that's been coming together for all of you, and really like specifically like the leadership pieces, the leadership plays that have brought that into existence.
All right, so first to give our viewers and listeners a little bit of a heads up on what's all going on over here at Advanced Learning Academy, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening over there? You have the 3-8 being advanced, you have a 9-10 being the high school. So can you tell us a little bit, unpack that about what's going on over there? If you could talk a little bit about the authenticity of the curriculum too, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I'll get started. So we opened Advanced Learning Academy in 2015 as an elementary school. It came out of, in California, we have the local control funding formula, and that's how we receive our per pupil spending. And so we were experiencing declining enrollment as a district. And we also noticed that a lot of our parents were leaving, going to charter schools that were offering some innovative curriculum. And so as a district, our district leadership at the time decided to open a dependent charter school. So that's kind of how our school came into existence. In 2016, we found that our 6th graders had nowhere to go for 7th grade. So we expanded into a 3 through 8 at that time. And then in 2017, that is when we applied for the grant through XQ and became one of the super schools. We didn't get the full grant allotment, but we were given $10 million. And so we were able, $3 million, right? And we were able to use that money to build the high school. And so Brian and Deborah came on 3 years ago with the high school with Circulos. And since then, it's not just a 9-10. We graduated our first class of seniors. So we are a 3 through 12 this year.
Awesome.
And next year we are adding TK. So going next year, we're going to be a TK through 12 school. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, you guys have just kept growing every single year, growing in every direction.
And we've moved a whole lot during the 6 years. We've moved to 3, 4, 5 different campuses. So that is one thing that we can talk about, experiencing some challenges with growth too.
Yeah, I
So-
assume when you said you were building the different things, you weren't actually building buildings, that you were using a lot of existing spaces as you were growing.
Hopefully.
along the way.
And then growing out of the spaces very
Yeah.
quickly and then having to find new spaces. Yes.
But that speaks to some really, it must have been a pretty good community response if you're constantly growing out of spaces.
Yes, yes, it is. And so I don't know if you want to share anything about the curriculum
Sure.
and what you've been working on.
Yeah, in terms of authentic curriculum, we have from the first day, we've really focused on project-based learning. And we also have something called place-based learning. So we coined the term P²BL, which is place times project-based learning, where a lot of our projects that our students work on happen in places in our community or in partnership with experts in the field. So we work with different community partners, from Latino Health Access to Visioneering Studios, which is a local architecture firm. It's like a smaller business, to bigger museum institutions like Grand Central Art Center, Latino Heritage Museum of Orange County, and a few more partners. And so our students do student-centered projects with teacher mentorship, and they're really researching the topics and issues that are relevant to their lives and their communities. So we had students create like a documentary on food deserts in Santa Ana, where they were able to go and explore farmers markets and lack of fresh foods in this community. We have students working on rent control issues, on gentrification issues, all kinds of things that are authentically happening. So instead of doing those hypothetical types of projects that you would typically see in a traditional school, we really, our curriculum is very dynamic and it changes with the times and whatever's happening in our community at that moment.
So when you think of that approach, is that approach just in the high school, or is that approach carried on throughout your, well, P8 and then, your 9 and 12?
So Circulos, really the model that they're using is in the high school, but in the early grades, we do a lot to prepare the students for that type of research, for the presentation, for the skills. But getting out into the community really happens when students are in high school.
And that's really, you would use place-based. Would you use that term place-based to really describe the getting out into community part? Or at the 3-8, would you also say there's place-based curriculum going on there?
It's more project-based in the early grades, and then they do a couple of place-based events, but not at the magnitude that they do in high school. Sorry, we have some cars going by.
That's all good.
Are you okay if I close the window really quick?
Yeah,
Are you
no worries.
hearing the trip?
It's just adding some nice background sound. It's great.
It was a little warm in this room, so we
Yeah.
cracked a window.
The air
Yeah.
conditioning doesn't work after the students leave.
But when we looked at the elementary, you also seem to focus on a lot of interesting facets like SEL, the interpersonal skills, competency-based, personalized learning, elective pathways.
Yes.
Can you also tell us a little bit more about that? Because it seems like that really cues up your kiddos when they get into the high school.
So Circulos is actually circles in Spanish, and it has to do with mentoring circles. And so that's kind of the model of our school. Beginning in 3rd grade, we have advisory or mentoring every morning. We do go in a circle. Well, prior to COVID, we met with everybody in a circle. And we would just have that place of connecting with our students. One of our goals is to know all of our students, know their story, know them by name. So we really take the time to get to know students as an individual, what their personal goals are, what pathways they're interested in, and then we personalize their learning plan and playlists for them based on their interests, so that they really have some control over their own learning, that it's a student-centered focus, that we're not just standing at the front of the class saying, hey, this is what we're going to learn today. We really make sure that our students have a part, our students and our parents, our entire community really has a part in learning for all of our students.
Use an interesting term there, Kim, playlist.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that? What is that to you all, and how's that look and feel for the kids?
So even going back to 2015, when we opened the school, we had a lot of different models that we used for the kids, but kind of what stuck for us is using Canvas as our LMS. And what all of our teachers, even prior to COVID, had a blended learning model in their classrooms. In elementary, and in middle school, they do a station rotation with a collaborative model, a direct learning model, and an independent model where they work a lot on their personalized learning goals. So teachers will work and create like a may-do, must-do playlist for students that they use. So when they're working either collaboratively or independently, they're able to have targeted instruction based on their interests, but also based on their skill level, what they need to fill in some of the gaps or accelerate.
And I can add on at the high school level, that translates to, we try to make our project units really enticing and engaging for our students, and our students love watching Netflix. And so we actually organize our year by seasons. So there are 4 seasons in a school year with 2 seasons per semester. And each season has different units, which basically are like different episodes. And so, for example, our 9th graders in English class are working on a season called Ash and Feather, Stories Inside Out. So this is, half a semester where they're really focusing on cultivating their voices, sharing their stories, and really empowering students about their identity using arts integration, poetry, hip hop, just different things that are relevant to our students, what they're interested in. And so throughout the school year, in every content area, and sometimes interdisciplinary content areas, they are working on like 4 project seasons, if that makes sense. And then the way we lay it out on Canvas as well is very similar to the middle school and elementary, where there's options to do additional like challenges or enrichment sessions. And then there's like focus sessions for interventions for students who need that extra time with the teacher. So
as well as perhaps like quarantining options,
Yes.
like trying to really build in no matter where you are, whether you're in person or at home or wherever it may be, or just unable to attend, like you can still engage with the curriculum. And I wanted to also add, we have a checklist that we bring both the teachers and the students, and we'd like to even expand that beyond to other colleagues and whatnot, that really forces us to take a look at what we're writing so that it truly is relevant for and engaging for the students, and bringing them into that feedback process is extremely valuable. Hearing they're the most honest with you. So
we have that checklist. It's called the relevant RRA checklist, relevance, rigor, and agency. And we collaborated on that checklist working with a partner. Basically whenever our teachers create these project seasons, we actually bring in students to give critical feedback before they implement the project and after. And so sometimes teachers will work on a project season and they think, oh, this is the best idea. But then you get that critical feedback from actual teenagers who are like, that's actually kind of boring. And then they'll pivot and change gears, because we really want the students' voices to be part of the creation of these learning experiences.
So I'm always, one of the things in the deep dives, we're actually always sort of curious about documents and stuff like that. So the checklist, like, is that something that emerges out of the partnership with XQ? Is that something you all built in-house, living somewhere else?
yeah, a lot of times we'll take something and working with XQ when we have our meetings and something comes along and we love it. We really have that moment where we're like, oh my gosh, this is what we have to use. What often happens though is that it needs to be tweaked and like really fits for us personally. I'm thinking about the screenplay. We kind of get a screenplay and it's a really good like template, but it doesn't really fit our exact needs. So we tweak it. We make sure our teachers like to use it. There's nothing worse than getting the materials and like, oh, I don't really have a voice in this. So we want to make sure it goes through that vetting process. So if we're going to use something, it's something that the teachers actually want to use.
And I think we just take that approach with everything we do. It's always about feedback and revision and continuous improvement. So even when we get those like RRA checklists or competencies in partnership with Redesign through our work with XQ, nothing we currently have is the original format. So we've constantly changed at the end of a semester, and especially during the summers when we have our Circulos Institute with our teachers, we like to just look at the document and everybody just marks it up and we change it to really fit our needs and how our teachers would really use it in a more applicable way.
So I got it. So I'm sorry to dive into a checklist, but we do love, I mean, at the detailed level, right? That's as leaders are trying to do this work, specifically around this rigor, relevance, agency question, and trying to get to relevant to the kid. These are all nice words to use, but some, it's like hard to implement well. And so I think the checklist is really awesome, but it is something that you all have been tweaking in an ongoing way. So I think that's actually a really powerful leadership practice that I'll just highlight here, because we're also highlighting leadership practices. So rigor, relevance, agency checklist, just doing a quick search, you can find one out there. But the fact that you all are annually going through it and customizing to this is what makes sense for us as a team, I think that's a really powerful approach, not just that it's relevant to your team, but also builds ownership of the document in the team. So like, this is not some external thing I'm being forced to do. Remember when we built this? I think that's really powerful. So kudos to all of you.
And I was just going to add that I think it has, in looking at some of the models in your book, treating teachers as professionals, I think that's where they really spend a lot of time with all of our teachers, but especially in the high school, dedicating time to working with teachers on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I don't know if you want to explain some of the professional development.
So Brian is our master schedule guru here. So do you want to explain how you structured the days?
Yeah. So part of it is all just my own personal experience and like understanding how teachers react to meetings and how that happens kind of after hours sometimes, and it's not always a real positive environment. So I was trying to kind of like create a way to really embed time together into the system, the regular calendar, the regular structure of the day. So we kind of blocked our schedule, a normal release time is like 3 or 3:30. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we get out at 2:10, so that we try to really embed some real time to sit down and grind, basically, to say, hey, if you want to work together, you got to be together, sometimes. And Zoom has been helpful, especially during the pandemic. We still made that happen, but it's, even now that we're back on, just making time to really sit down with each other and talk about the issues, the questions, the concerns, just really embedding that time is critical. You have to have the time if you work together.
So those opportunities for collaboration, they end by 3:30. Which is the time when school gets out on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So it's just part of the school, like the work day for teachers. So there's full participation and everyone's there, not too burnt out from the day. And everyone's just part of that culture of like, let's get work done. And so we always meet in a circle, and we do that twice a week. So.
And I think our biggest focus over the last year, if we had some sort of identity, I think it really has been dedicated to strong instruction, to really make sure that we're using, we spent a lot of time talking about, we call it a screenplay, going back to Netflix and whatnot. We call our units, screenplays and seasons and episodes and whatnot. So, and in that screenplay, like blunt, just right on there, it's like, I can't remember exactly, I should, but how is this relevant to your lived experience as like a Santa Ana resident, as wherever you're from? That question is in there from the onset to really make sure we're directing all of our work toward making it meaningful for the kids, for the students.
Do you call it screenplays all the way down like into the Canvas level? Like, it's translating all that far down where kids are really digesting this in a different way than they would normally digest a Canvas shell?
Yeah, so we actually are, some of our teachers are in different places. Some of our teachers have been with us for 3 years and some just started. And so they're in different levels in terms of how comfortable they are with the screenplay method. But with our more seasoned teachers who have been trained the last 3 years, the goal is to have the screenplay also on Canvas, because we noticed that traditionally, the process of like writing a unit is not very transparent. The student doesn't really know where they're going next. It's all based on teacher direction, but we want students to know the direction, like what's the end result, what are the things, the milestones I need to reach to showcase my competencies to get to that performance task at the end. So it's completely transparent, so they can see really the lesson plan for the next 6 weeks through showcasing the screenplay on Canvas.
I like the framing. I saw
Yeah.
Susanna really loving the framing also. It sort of forces it to think about a project by calling it, using all of these words and series, and it's really pushing it towards much more of a project than a unit and all the traditional words we use in education. All right, lovely. So while we're talking curator of talent jobs, what else is in the portfolio of curator of talent jobs besides the master schedule?
Well, I think it's quite a bit, you know. I wear a lot of hats. I have a lot of roles. I think the reality is just serving the school. I like to think that my job boils down to working with the students, working with the teachers, working with the community to make learning fun, and to make it fun in a way where you can experience success. You know, where there's nothing more frustrating than not succeeding. So understanding competency-based learning, you know, that's learning that happens over time. You know, it's not task one and I pass it and move on. Like really building a systematic plan that can happen over time, so we can think a little bit differently. So I think that's a really big endeavor, you know. But I like to say that that's something I'm trying to improve.
And something that Brian does as well, I think, is really truly like cultivate the talent in each of our teachers. So he does this thing where he has teachers share their affirmations at the beginning of the year, and he's in his own special way, through like lots of circles and encouragement and coaching and mentorship, he's able to have teachers kind of find what they're best at and contribute that to the team, and in really creative ways that may not necessarily be like the traditional teacher roles that you would expect. And so it's kind of hard to explain, but
Well,
he tries to push that innovation out of everyone, if that makes sense.
I feel like you should enjoy coming to work, that you should love what you do, and who you are is not necessarily separated from your work. So if you can find who you are and you can bring that out into your work and with your colleagues and with your students, you know, I just really truly believe the students will just have a better experience through that. So yes, I make people stand up and say their affirmations. I am creative, I am determined, and I am, there's another one. I forgot my affirmation. But yeah, just
it's
saying
changing.
it, you know, voicing it, you know, is just really a powerful thing, you know. And it really, when you talk about personalized learning, getting to know the students and having them cultivate their voice and really claiming who they are as an individual is something we can definitely use to cater to their needs.
So I'm guessing that real effort on your part to really bring out who the teachers are as people and their own sort of experiences, backgrounds, things they're interested in and good at, probably has a relationship with their effort to develop authenticity and relevance with kids. Can you speak to that at all? Like, I'm assuming there's a connection there between authenticity and cultural relevance amongst staff, as well as to cultural relevance to kids.
Yeah, I can give a specific example of how we try to really bring out like our teachers' interests, their hobbies, their passions. So one of the things we do between seasons, we have something called Community Week, where we basically pause our master schedule and we take that time to do a lot of our place-based learning excursions to get things like, you know, assessments and that kind of stuff out of the way. But also we have a lot of fun doing passion sessions. And so this means that teachers can lead passion sessions about anything they're passionate about. We had a teacher do a whole thing on Pokemon. Another teacher did theirs on sourdough starter. Just anything that they are interested in outside of academics. And we even tell teachers, because they always want to do these academic sessions, which we have space for. We have enrichment and focus sessions as well. But for passion sessions, we tell teachers, make it non-academic. Let's like connect with the students in a different way. And we're trying to level this up for our next passion session by having students propose ideas to lead their own passion sessions, and then mentored by a teacher. And so now it's becoming like students teaching students for these really fun passion sessions. And when we do surveys of our kids after community weeks, it's always like their their favorite part of community week is passion sessions. And it makes us wonder how, traditionally school can be, boring. And when we bring in all of those different cultural assets and funds of knowledge of our students and our teachers that, make them human, it just makes school much more fun, I think, and much more authentic. Yeah.
So Kim, does this kind of approach work in advanced as well in the P8?
Right.
Are you taking some of these lessons? Like how is the innovation? Is it cross hibernating? Is it coming from the high school coming down to you all, or you all going up? So how does that work? Are you adopting any of these practices that Brian, being the master of talent, the curator of talent? All the names.
I like that. Master talent.
So as I mentioned earlier, when we started as an elementary, we were already using some of these practices, and now the kids are in high school. So they're able to use some of the skills that they've developed over the last couple of years. The challenge that we've had is that we are on 2 different campuses. Right now, we're 3 miles apart from each other. So we are working to implement those practices, but I think going forward, that is going to be our vision for the vertical alignment, is to have more of what's happening with the high school trickle down to the intermediate and to the elementary. Because with the shift in students, kind of the shift in innovation went with the students, and we got to rebuild that at the lower levels again.
You're always in a state of building.
Yes.
Yes, you
It
are.
presents quite a few challenges
Oh
with
my gosh.
turnover,
Yeah.
even higher ups turnover, and then
Yeah.
teacher turnover. It's that it's just constantly being about a crazy problem to sustain it all.
But one thing I know that it is really cultivated at the middle school level and elementary at ALA is the students cultivating their voice. So they have a very strong speech and debate program at the 3rd through 8th level. And especially in the intermediate school, students are really encouraged to use their voice to share their story, to advocate for things that they care about. And so they actually bring those skills into high school. And so it's actually one of the competencies, which is one of our favorites, called Cultivate Your Voice. And so without that, I don't think we would have as strong of students we have, because they're just kind of conditioned to have conversations. And because we have really small learning communities, all of our students' voices from 3rd grade through 12th grade, we hear their voices every day. And I know that's really hard for some teachers to say, especially when they have like 40 kids in their classroom. But because we have small learning communities and we really emphasize cultivating voice, that's one way that we really create that alignment.
So one of the things that we get a lot of, and I know that with XQ you all have run, and the ability to build circulos and rename things and build things from scratch, we get tons of questions amongst our participants though about more of the elementary and middle space. And so say a little bit, and Jason got to be on site, we did the interview, we know there's amazing things happening in that 3-8 as well. Talk a little bit about sort of what is different about that learning experience, particularly around like the kinds of projects that kids are getting to do while they're in the 3-8.
Sure. So what we've done is, we speak about innovation. Every year has been different. And with the shift in grades, this year, my 3rd through 5th grade. So we only have 40 kids in 3rd through 5th grade right now. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to build the K2, is to get the kids coming in and sustaining them. Because a lot of times once you start in 3rd grade, kids are established at their elementary school and they don't necessarily want to leave and start a new school. So some of the shift in teaching has gone from the elementary multiple subject grades to the middle school. And that's one thing that we do, is we have a lot of multiple subject teachers in our 6th through 8th grade. And we call them core teachers. So they do like a math science or an ELA social studies, and they're able to integrate those cross-curricular projects within their classes. And we also work with flexible scheduling too. This year, we've kind of gone to an 8-period block schedule to give kids 2 electives. One of the things, as Deborah mentioned, was we have a strong speech and debate team, and now they're moving into high school and we're trying to rebuild the team at the elementary levels. However, sometimes they want to do robotics and they want to also do speech and debate. And previous to this, we were making students choose. And it was just challenging. So in listening to their voice and listening to their interest, what we ended up doing was adding a second elective so they can do a visual and performing art in addition to one of the CTE or the STEM classes that they want to take. And I think that that helps with when we're building projects, knowing from year to year what our students are interested in and how the demand changes, which makes our course schedule change. And this year we're adding music, and we had a couple of options of what we wanted to add. And so we're doing ukulele. We had done it in the past, and now the kids that were doing ukulele before in 3rd and 4th grade are now in 7th and 8th grade. And they said, hey, we really enjoyed it. We want to bring it back. So we've been working with our music teacher to get a choir and a ukulele class that students will be able to participate in. So it's really looking at where our students' interests are as they move up in grades, and then adapting what we are doing to fit students' needs.
Yeah, I am curious to keep unpacking it. I think what we saw, there's still a lot more cultural relevance going on in those spaces. I think particularly around those multidisciplinary, multiple adults bringing together a project is likely to move a project out of like, here's the traditional way to do this thing, to multiple talents coming together. And so I think that the effort on your part to really be multidisciplinary, even in the elementary middle school space, which is less, we see it less frequently, even though the potential is there much more to be sort of multidisciplinary and multi-adult. There's less of the, you must live in traditional disciplinary boxes going on in those grade levels. And so I'm willing to bet that there is some really cool, interesting stuff going on there just because of the structure that you have that allows all these different pieces to come together.
Yeah, and I think we were also, one of the recent projects we've done is for Dia de los Muertos, which is celebrated in Hispanic cultures, Day of the Dead. And so looking at the one of our teachers that teaches a core history and English block was able to capitalize on that with looking, researching the history, going out in the community, building their altars, and then having the presentation in community spaces involving parents, letting them come in, share their stories, and other community members. So what we really try and do is focus on what is relevant to our students, but in taking it back to some of those different, we also had that at the high school too, where they got to do an art exhibition at one of the local colleges too. So carrying on to that. So we kind of build it up vertically for our students so that they get to participate, beginning in the lower grades all the way up to high school.
Talk to us a little bit about the parents as far as this approach at the elementary and the secondary. How is this different experience for the parents than traditional kind of schooling that we're used to?
I think one of the things that we really pride ourselves in doing with parents is educating our parents in the shifts that is happening in education. I think that parents from the outside won't always look and understand. I think we have to do in the younger grades a lot of explaining to our parents of why these shifts are important, why they're meaningful to their student, how we are focusing on problem solving with our students, how we are providing them with skills that they will need once they enter college and career in the workforce. Sometimes parents that are new to our school won't necessarily understand the approach. They'll hear great things about the school. They'll come to a parent meeting. We'll share with them. Like, in fact, we're going to be doing enrollment meetings next week or the next couple of weeks. And so we're going to be sharing about our school. But sometimes it's just, I want to put my name in for the lottery, hope my number gets chosen. I go to your school and then I really don't understand how your school is different. So I think it's really important that we're communicating the message of what makes our school different, the student-centered practices, the flexible learning, the constant innovation and adaptability of the school, so that parents really and students really understand why we're special.
That's awesome. Now, Kim, you always seem to really enjoy your job. Every time I talk to you, you seem to have the best job in the world. So how is leading a school like this? And technically you're over both the schools, right?
Yes.
So how is how is leading an entire spectrum, soon to be pre to 12? How is that different than like your peers' jobs? Because you're still in this district, right? So you're just you're a dependent, a dependent charter school, right?
Yeah, it's very different, and I do love my job, and that was what keeps me here every day. Every year I feel like, we were talking about expansion and growing. It's super stressful, but I feel like this is going to be my year. We're going to do this year, you know, and I feel like it's a fresh start every time, and especially starting now with kindergarten, it's like that constant innovation. Like, we can develop an amazing kindergarten program, you know, not that everyone else doesn't have amazing kindergarten programs, but I just feel like there is so much opportunity every single year. And, you know, we get halfway through the year like we are now, and we're starting to plan for next year. And it's really exciting. It's super stressful, but I do love it. And I know that we're doing the right things for kids. We're doing the right thing for our community and building these skills for our kids. And I'm appreciative of my team here that works so hard to help carry out the vision of the school and the parents. So it is very different. And when I sit with my colleagues in meetings, we are really speaking two different, and being a charter, having a little bit more control of our budget, but then all the compliance that comes with it. It took me a long time, and I still don't understand all of it, all of the charter school compliance. And, you know, I go to my district people and I say, help me with this. And they help me where they can, but they still don't know charter either. And so reaching out to the Department of Education and other charter schools, trying to get some help. It's a learning experience that I was telling one of my office staff today. I was like, we've been around for 6 years. There's only 2 of us that were here on day 1 that are still here. Like, the turnover, the burnout is crazy. And you really have to love what you do to be able to come every day and subject yourself to some of the stresses that we all experience.
And I would just add, like, it's really fun to work with these two. You know, we truly enjoy the staff that we have. You know, I was with Deborah long ago at a middle school, and you know, when she was coming here, it's like I wanted to come. You know, like, to really having a team that you get along with and enjoy working with. I think there's something to be said about that as well.
So who did you all? You're all pretty relatively new. Circulos is newer even, and then there's new things coming. In the space of the curriculum, the pedagogy places in particular, who are you all relying on? Like, what are those go-to places for you as you think about the, like, even models or thinkers you rely on as you specifically around this crafting of an experience that's relevant to the very locally diverse population? I mean, in some ways the school is not diverse, but it is actually, like, massively diverse in broad American eyes. And so to speak to that student population, and you're like, how did your thinking come about there, and who did you rely on?
Wow. So going back when we first started the school, we did a lot of work with the SCALE project out of Stanford. We also worked with Johns Hopkins, and we went to Baltimore and saw Henderson Hopkins, their K-8 school there, because we started as a K-8. We also went and visited some schools in Oakland, in Vision schools. We went to Lindsay Unified. We went to Vista, which was another XQ school down in San Diego, in South County or North San Diego County. So we really tried to reach out to the XQ partnerships, the different schools, and kind of learn and grow with them. I don't know if you guys want to add anything else.
Yeah, so we've, like Kim said, we've really collaborated a lot with other XQ schools. We have a lot of different, like every summer there's an institute. There's also opportunities throughout the year for conferences and for school visits. They used to be in person, but now on Zoom. So we have opportunities to work with other like-minded educators, working with similar student demographics. But then also something that's really, that has been very influential in making sure that our curriculum and our learning experiences are authentic to our students' communities and their lives is by bringing in community partners that are local to this community, many of whom live in this community, who are Latinx, speak the same language, bring in the same shared experiences to really make culturally relevant learning happen. And so I think that the community partnerships are a really big aspect of making it authentic for our students.
So you're thinking a few years before you even thought about circulose, or did you always think about circulose? I don't know. when you started the charter school at Advanced, who did you learn from there? Like, how did you lean into that new opening?
Yeah, I think we were just really innovative there, and that's when we were really starting, like I said, working with Hopkins, Henderson Hopkins. Okay. When we were working, that's where we really started the work at the beginning. And then when circulose came about, originally circulose was going to be its own charter school, and then what they ended up doing was we refiled for a K-12 school code, and then we added it onto Advanced Learning Academy because it had a lot of alignment in the vision and the goals for our students. So it seemed like it would be the best fit to start off as a small dependent charter.
So then as you got into it, the questions we're always into is, what didn't work? What challenges emerged? What ideas did you scratch early on that you were trying?
I think from the beginning, what I know we tried for a long time to do was to come up with, we were calling it PEDS at the time, Personalized Learning Management System. And we were trying to take in data from all kinds of personalized learning programs that we were using. And we tried to design that in-house with our TIS team here and programmers. And we must have worked on that for 2-3 years trying to get that going. And we just realized it wasn't going to be what we needed to be. So I say scrapped it early, but it was early in the school. And so for our data, I mean, honestly, teachers just developed their own, sheets, Excel spreadsheets or different sheets, and they're able to manage their data that way, just pulling in information for all the programs. It is more cumbersome, but they've created their own heat maps so that they can track student growth, monitor progress, set goals with students. So it's something that we had this idea that we were going to make this great system that never happened, and teachers found a workaround, and it's been, they all do it a little different, but it's been working great for us.
Yeah, and I could add on to that. I like the idea of workaround. I feel like that's the challenge that we often face. So for example, we do competency-based learning, which doesn't necessarily match so well with our Aries gradebook system, which is the system that our school district uses for grade reporting, transcripts, and all of that stuff. And so having to kind of balance the traditional systems that we have to adhere to because we have to be compliant to those systems, including like seat time and all of those different traditional systems that have existed for like 100 years, but then also marrying that with all of the innovative things we want to do, like sometimes taking away the master schedule and doing community week, or having a student accelerate by showing a competency in one skill so they can, instead of having to sit through a whole semester of a class, if they show mastery, they can move on. So a lot of those things have been very tricky working with our traditional transcripts and gradebook. Our teachers have been really creative. Our math team actually came up with like a rubric grading method where it's kind of aligned to our competency rubric, but we're still kind of, I guess it's like the beta phase of it. We're still juggling that this year. And that's kind of one of our goals to to like learn more through the experimenting really. And so that's been a big challenge, definitely navigating those traditional structures that we have to stick with.
Yeah, because we're standards-based grading up until 8th grade, and then because of A through G requirements, we go to A, B, C, D, no F's,
Yeah.
hopefully.
And then the
But,
transcript too,
yeah.
just doesn't necessarily show the competencies because it's a very standard, in California, we call it the A through G requirements for like the University of California system. So it's very simple, like it doesn't necessarily show what our students can do and what they have done, if that makes sense.
So I'm sort of particularly curious from your standpoint, Deborah, in that role, working with community, like that was definitely part of the job, right? Anything as you're working with community to bring authenticity into the school, did anything not work? Were there community partners that weren't good community partners, or like that's a non-traditional role for schools to be so outward facing. So give us a little insight into that space.
Yeah, sure. So I wouldn't say we've had any community partnerships that didn't work at all, but we've definitely had ones that were much stronger than others. And one factor that was very important in making sure that a community partnership was really strong was the co-creation of the learning experiences between the community partner and the school teacher or leader. So for example, sometimes we would be in community spaces multiple times a week. But many of the things that our students were doing, they could have actually just easily done that in the classroom at school. So it was almost like we were just substituting the space. But with place-based learning, we want the space around the students to be like part of the text, part of that learning experience. We want them to really engage with not just the person at the museum or at the site, but also the teacher. So the teacher and the museum professionals, they work together in partnership. And that created much better projects and a more fruitful experience for our students versus the ones where our students would just go and then maybe like the person at the community partnership place would just say something. The teacher probably maybe wasn't part of the creation of the assignment or the activity. And then it's kind of not necessarily, it didn't really gel together. But those still, the project still came out okay, but it could have been better if there was more collaboration. And I think that requires a lot of time to set aside time for the teacher to actually meet with like the museum people and really sit down and like draft out ideas and brainstorm and work on a shared curriculum.
And just speaking of all of the roles Deborah does just over the years, the fact that she was heavy, just a large part of making that all happen. So, that definitely poses its challenges to like build that culture where, the teachers are also reaching out, on some of their own initiatives, encouraging those contacts. You never know where a partnership might come. And I might even say that's part of, something that if I were to do it all over again, is like make more connections. Like you never know what's going to hit. Even if it doesn't come to fruition in in 3 or 4 years, you never know when, that alignment between the community partner with the teachers, with the students, with the community, it all just kind of comes together. And like, I think we had with the Ash and Feather that you mentioned before.
Do you all have some sort of a system? Like, I can see where that could get really unwieldy where, Kim's making a connection, Brian's making a connection, Deborah's making a connection. Like, do you have a system where you're putting them all together or a coordinator? We've seen that at some schools.
Yes, so I was the curator of projects and partnerships. So I would kind of see everything coming together, and we really have themes and when new partners come, we just got a initial meeting. So they always start with these initial meetings on Zoom or in person, where we just ideate with a potential partner. So we just met with UC Irvine PhD students who are working on an air quality project in our local community, and they want to incorporate students and have them be part of their research process for the next year. And so my job is to kind of think, okay, what are the different grade levels teaching, which season would that fit perfectly with? And so I'm thinking, okay, our chemistry teacher for 11th grade, or maybe that can be in tandem with the US history class, so they can do like an interdisciplinary thing on like public policy, the environment, air quality testing, things like that. And so it's just reaching out to the teachers, really pitching a lot of ideas to different people and getting their buy-in. And I think the more excited people are, the better the partnership becomes. And so just creating that first spark of interest and then following up and, coordinating additional meetings and then that initial trip out to the location. And it just kind of starts all from that initial meeting where you just brainstorm really. And so I don't know if I answered your question. I think I kind of got
Yeah, you did. My head was spinning as far as how you were tapping into what we call YPAR, Youth Participatory Action Research with the university. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Jason's jam is the great researcher on the team. So, okay, I have a couple questions left, but we're sort of at that time when we want to open it up for Janelle, Susanna, Scott. If you all want to throw any questions at the team, feel free. If not, we sort of have 2 left in the hopper. I'd still love to get to, but I want to be respectful of time, and so open it up.
I think my question I put in the chat was about the assessment stuff, and you kind of just covered that and very well, because it's, as you mentioned, it's a very challenging and nuanced thing when you're on the edge of innovation. So so thank you for that information, because that's a really tricky one. Yeah.
Awesome. Janelle, you want to jump in?
No pressure.
You don't have to.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm really interested in more of your professional development. I love that way that you build it in within that day. So I love how you said how if you don't work together, or how do you design together without working together? So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that time on those Tuesdays and Thursdays of what's happening during those times.
Yeah, so like I was saying before, we've really been, would you agree, like instruction, so we spend a lot of time trying to use the language, so a big piece of it is like using the language down from, the teachers, the students, so we all can kind of align to it. But basically what happens is, a lot of times Deborah and I will just get together, and sometimes we'll involve others in the process. And we kind of start with some like urgent needs that have to happen, but always on the list is like, what are we going to do instructionally? And that was a huge focus more last year. It was hard to kind of come back to campus, so a lot of the time it has been spent on logistics, if I'm being honest, just, getting back to campus. And there's so many things with fire drills and earthquakes, like all these different things. You still have to cover those things too, but it's finding the moments where you're still going to hit on the things that really you care about most. Just making sure that for me, it's making sure that we're using the language, that we're really focusing on giving our students those quality experiences. So the PD is really about talking about modalities in the classroom, like changing it up, like, we have direct instruction, you have group, like just doing so many different things, the way you operate in the classroom to make sure that our students coming back to school are enjoying it, and that we're just always about pushing ourselves to the limits, making sure that we're doing best practices, and making sure that our seasons are like, what would you say, they're dynamic, we're trying to.
Right. So I think this whole, I think what we do is really build a culture of continuous improvement. And we always start, we also do, we also like check in on our teachers, because it's not easy teaching during a global pandemic with all the different protocols and everything involved with that. So we always start with circles, and Brian is the guy who makes the circles happen. So sometimes he'll ask really great questions that we're serving the SEL needs of our teachers as well, and we're really checking in on them. And then we oftentimes we will go through logistical things, but the main event is really instruction. We notice that through really solid instruction, you will have less discipline issues, you will have more attendance. I mean, there's so many different ways that good instruction can kind of solve a lot of the challenges that exist when you have in-person learning. And so we always start with a circle, and we also have a learning arc, which we actually created last year. And so last year, our push was to get everyone to do project-based learning and use screenplays. And so, and do those rigor, relevancy, and agency checks. And so that was something we did probably dozens of times throughout the last year on Zoom with our teachers in like 3-hour sessions and things like that. This year, I think we want to move kind of level up towards more rigor. But we're still grappling with that. So we're still learning, and we're very honest and humble with our team. We kind of all come to the circle as like a non-hierarchical circle of learners where no one's an expert, but we're all kind of trying to figure things out and make things better. So nothing is just left as is. All the seasons that teachers wrote last year, they're constantly changing them, adding to them, and things like that.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we do is just like really prioritizing and really showing, putting it down there that you really do value feedback. You know, so one thing is we want to talk and we say, hey, we did this during community week. You have to take time if you want to improve it to have the discussion about it. So oftentimes too, it's like saying, hey, can we talk about this event that took place? And we really want to hear how it went. You know, here's what the kids say. How do we feel about that? So just, it all takes time.
Yeah. And I think it's really important what you guys mentioned about the adult check-ins, because I think that that's something we try and open all, just like our parent meetings, our student meetings, our staff meetings with a circle, so that we have that continuity leading up through all of our interactions and really focusing on the SEL. Because I think during distance learning, we lost a lot of engagement from our students. We had a lot of great practices happening, and then we had to come back with safety protocols, and we all have our masks, and we have desk shields up, and we can only face forward. We can't be facing each other. We have to social distance. And it's been very challenging because we had such great connections between our students. And I was noticing we had picture day the other day, and students didn't even want to take off their masks for their pictures because they don't want people to see them. They've kind of gotten so used to as like a little safety blanket wearing their mask that they're really having some anxiety about when the shields come down and the masks come down. I'm going to have to interact and connect with people on a different level again. And we're having to relearn that as early as the elementary grades all the way up to high school. So I think it's important that we spend time really connecting with our staff so that they feel comfortable. And then they can kind of show that to the students that it's okay. We can be vulnerable like we once were with each other. We don't have to have all these barriers and be scared to touch each other, with everything that's going on in the world.
Awesome. Thanks, team. I know we're probably too short on time for a question, Scott, but opening it up, if you want to jump in, maybe provide even a reflection if you feel like it.
Scott's our third author for those folks who don't know, who are viewing after the fact.
Hey y'all, it's nice to see you on camera since I didn't get to visit in person. Thanks for being part of the book. My question was really around onboarding. As we know, this is a very different kind of teaching for educators, and this is a very different kind of learning for students. So my question was around what those first few weeks and months look like for both educators and your students.
So our onboarding starts with the interview process. We really shook up the traditional interview process, and we do kind of like a fun collaborative game. We do a group interview for the first round where we present teachers with like interesting statistics about schools or questions they agree or disagree with about controversial issues. Like, for example, if a student never attended your class, but scored very high on an assessment, indicating that they understood everything in the class, should the student pass and get credit for the course? So we ask questions like that, and we tell them there's no right or wrong answers, but we're really listening in on is their justification, their explanation, how they approach different situations. And so starting from the get-go, teachers are always kind of weirded out by our interview. And then we also have a lot of informational sessions. We invite teachers from other schools in our district to kind of look at our curriculum. And so we try to publicize how we're different. We don't want to like trick anyone into joining our school. And so we want to bring in the best talent and people who are willing to do it the hard way, because innovation is much harder than teaching at the status quo. When you can just take out a book and open to chapter 5.2, that's way easier than having to create original curriculum where you're linking to a community partner and you're doing competency-based learning and all of that stuff. And so that's how we kind of onboard from the get-go. But then we also have our Circulos Institutes in the summer where we pay teachers for, sometimes we did it for 2 weeks. This past year, we just did it for a week because of COVID and everything, where we really onboard teachers, we bring in that culture and we give them the space and the time. And also we pay them for their time for working together, collaborating, creating their curriculum. And then we also have opportunities through XQ where we can share in that vision making and bring in teachers, really like speak to their hearts and minds. And a lot of our teachers, most of our teachers actually, they have the same reason why we come to work every day is because they're tired of the way things were and the way things are at traditional spaces. And they're willing to kind of push the boundaries, take those risks and be in a different kind of space.
I just want to add, when we opened the school to onboard our staff, we did a 6-week boot camp before the school even opened and kind of worked with the teachers in all the different practices, developing the culture of the school, working on behavioral expectations, getting our systems, getting our curriculum, familiarizing themselves with what personalized learning is, how to collaborate with each other. So we really spent a lot of time when we were designing the school intentionally focusing on those areas so that once we did open the doors, it had a better understanding for everybody, our students and our staff, of what our goals were as a school.
Okay, well, you all have been super generous tonight. Jason, are you going to sneak in one more? We're at that time. We should call.
No, I was going to say awesome. We kept them over 2 minutes.
Exactly. So thank you all for letting us sort of dive deep into a bunch of the different practices that are going on and getting down to the checklist level. Yay. And so, you know, we appreciate taking that look inside, and all of our folks in the What School Could Be community that are going to be participating and getting to watch the video, diving in a little bit more deeply. So appreciate all of you for doing that, and then turn it over to Jason or Susanna. Any last things we need to say?